All right, we're going to jump in. Joshua chapter 20, there are 9 verses. It's kind of fun because we went from like really long chapters into like the few that have like 9 verses, 16 verses. And when you land on one of them, it's kind of like, oh wow, this will be easy. And then you read the chapter and you're like, there's so much to get into. So yeah, turn your Bibles, Joshua chapter 20. We're going to be talking about God anointing or appointing 6 cities of refuge. I've got my 3 sections. The first one we're going to look at is section 1, a place of refuge from the avenger of blood. That's verses 1 through 3. So I'm going to read that and then we'll dive into this Bible study a little bit more. So it says this, the Lord also spake unto Joshua, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, appoint out for you cities of refuge, whereof I spake unto you by the hand of Moses, that the slayer that killeth any person unawares and unwittingly may flee thither, and they shall be your refuge from the avenger of blood. Okay. Love the word thither, by the way. How's it going?
The Avenger of Blood sounds so sick.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. You will learn about him in a little bit, or them, whoever is employed, whatever gender, but back in those days it would probably be a dude. So let's start with verse 1. The Lord also spake unto Joshua. So isn't it incredible that throughout this whole book, the main thing that's been happening is God has been directing. There's been a vocal direction from God saying, do this, do that. Live here, take over this city, dwell, make it your home. And God again is speaking to Joshua and saying to him, this is what I'd like you to do. God isn't silent. He's here again talking, having a conversation with his servant Joshua. And God is specifically here telling Joshua in verse 2 to appoint cities of refuge. What's a city of refuge? What do you guys reckon? The city of refuge. What's refuge? It's a weird word, right?
A safe place to stay.
Safety, safe place to stay. So, Joshua is being told by God to fulfill what was commanded previously. So we're going to look at this in Numbers 35 to basically appoint 6 cities of safety. Cities of refuge, okay? So we're going to hear cities of refuge, but whenever you hear refuge, you can think a safe place. A place where they're not going to get attacked. Go for it.
Wait, why are they making refuge?
We're going to find out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're going to find out, I promise. So, and actually this is my next point, so you already jumped ahead. Thanks a lot for wrecking my whole notes, whatever, that's fine.
Sorry.
So why do we need, look, it says here, so why do we need these cities? Question mark. To, obviously, be kept safe from the avenger of blood, of course.
And who's that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. So basically, let's think about this for a second. Verse 3, it says that the slayer that killeth. The guy that kills someone, right? The person who has slayed someone. If that person killed a person accidentally or unintentionally, this is a safe place where they can run to. What's that called? What if you're going to get tried in a court of law? What's that called? It's got a specific name.
Is it manslaughter?
Manslaughter. Awesome. Good job. So the purpose of these cities of refuge, of safety, was to be a protection to the slayer who killed someone. They were to protect someone in case of manslaughter instead of murder. How's it going? Basically, the person who accidentally killed someone, would need this protection. Specifically, here it comes from the avenger of blood. Sounds epic. So, the Hebrew word for this avenger of blood is goel, G-O-E-L, so goel. And in this context, it means the representative from the victim's family. So basically, my brother got killed, you're going to be representing me, avenger of blood, go and get the guy. So they would hire a person to track down the guy who killed the slayer, and he was basically charged with making sure that justice is carried out. So his job is basically to be like, to track this guy down. To track this guy down, the right person, and bring him to justice. So we can read in the Bible that God made sure that murderers were punished in ancient Israel. It's a big deal. Okay, murdering in back in those times in the Old Testament, still a big deal now, but but specifically back then it said, Exodus 20:13, verse 13, that's the 6th commandment. What does it say? Thou shalt not
Murder.
thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not shed another man's blood. We can read in Genesis 9:6, whosoever sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. So you don't shed blood. You wreck your image if you do that. You don't kill, because that's not what God does, okay? We can read in the New Testament that the use of the sword of execution is right. So Romans 13:3 and 4, it says this, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Will thou not then be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath unto him that doth evil. God's put in place in the Bible, we can read it, that murder is just wrong. And there's a judgment for that as well. So you can also check out extra reading for you as well, Numbers 35:31. And then if you stay in Numbers 35, 33 to 35 as well. So eventually we're going to go through Numbers and we're going to read all these references to how it interacts with Joshua, how it interacts with Exodus, Deuteronomy, even Judges. And it's amazing to think, it's not amazing because we just know it's true, right? But the Bible links. It all works to build up and to make it a full body of work here. So let's talk about the role of the Avenger of Blood. This specific person would be to track down the murderer and, if necessary, deliver him to the authorities for execution. So basically, you hire a hitman. Your guy's dead. He's been ran over by some, oxen in a field or something like that. They got away, and the dude who owns the oxen, he killed our brother. We need to go get him. Well, you need to hire this person, this Avenger of Blood, to go and track him down and bring him home for justice. Yeah. We'd all watch that movie, right? We'd all watch that movie. How's it going?
Wait, isn't there a specific commandment, if someone's oxen kills a guy, you gotta put down the oxen?
Oh yeah. Here's the deal. The role of the Avenger of Blood, basically a hitman, bringing the person to justice, but he would also have to stay with the biblical laws. And this is a big deal. He's not just able to do whatever he wants. He's not let's just run into a saloon and start shooting people up and be like, was any of you the guy? No, he had to do this by the law. So back in Deuteronomy 17:6-7, it says that they would need to have the testimony of 2 or 3 eyewitnesses. It says this, whosoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 of 3 witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. It doesn't matter if you find the guy and this one guy that was like, this is the guy, no. That's not enough. What's enough here is 2 to 3 witnesses, and that's how this works. So, there needs to be confirmation of the murder. There needs to be confirmation of the thing that's gone wrong. Not just one person speaking against it, but 2 or 3, okay? Why is that? What do you think? Why do you need multiple witnesses?
One witness might have a different story from another.
Okay.
So people lie.
People lie. You know what? If you had Eli saying one thing, Joshua saying another thing, Faraz saying another thing, you're all saying different stuff. Well, this story's not consistent. You're not valuable eyewitnesses in this situation. But if you all said the same thing and it collaborated together and you go, whoa, there's my case. One person's voice isn't enough here. And because it's written in the law, it needs to be done and upheld as well. So, the Avenger of Blood, we now realize, is not just a hitman that walks into a saloon and shoots everyone up and asks questions later. He's a guy that has to go by the law, and he's looking for proof. He's looking for proof, okay? So you have these cities of refuge. The reason why we have them is because the people who were innocent of murder could find safety there. And you got to kind of think, you have to have cities up for this one specific. How often did murder happen or manslaughter happen for this to? Well, it was a big enough deal that they had to have it set up this way. Okay, so it's kind of funny, but yeah. So section 2, entrance to the cities, protection and freedom. We're looking at verses 4 to 6. And it says this, and when he that doth flee unto one of those cities shall stand at the entering of the gate of the city, and shall declare his cause in the ears of the elders of that city, they shall take him into the city unto them, and give him a place that he may dwell among them. And if the avenger of blood pursue after him, then they shall not deliver the slayer up into his hand, because he smote his neighbour unwittingly, and hated him not before time. Verse 6, and he shall dwell in that city until he stand before the congregation for judgment, and until the death of the high priest that shall be in those days. Then shall the slayer return and come unto his own city, and unto his own house, unto the city from whence he fled. Okay, so you have the rules here about what can happen, why the person, when they've got to those cities, what they need to do. It's not just get into those cities and you're all good. Did anyone pick up what they had to do, what the kind of steps they had to do there? Verse 4, and when he doth flee into one of those cities, where does he have to stand? Go for it.
Yeah, at the entrance and whisper.
Right at the entrance. And what does he have to do? He has to declare, not whisper.
Oh,
There's no point in being like, I'm innocent.
It says something about whispering in the guy's ear.
Does it? What version of the Bible do you have?
I don't know. You read it too.
I didn't read anything about whispering. And shall declare his cause into the ears of the elders?
Yeah, ears.
Ain't no whispering, it's declaring.
Okay.
I'm innocent! I'm innocent. How many people are you going to convince if you just whispering? It's creepy, man. No one believes a whisperer. It wasn't me. Creepy. So, he has to act according to the custom of the day, okay? So the customs of the day, the elders of the city spent time waiting at the gates of the city. That's what they do. People coming in and going, they would want to make sure the gates were open, they make sure the gates were ready for people, make sure they know who's coming in and who's going and why and what's going on, right? So when the person flees, they come to the gates and they meet the elders, and they would take time to hear the case and take the person into the city and give him a place that he could dwell on. So they've heard the case, they've listened to him, okay? And then they would take him into the city and give him a place that he may be able to sleep and stay and live, okay? So after explaining the case, the person could expect to find protection within the rules of the city of refuge. But they would have to stay there and live there to enjoy that protection. So now think about this. There's been an accidental death. My baby oxygen has mauled that guy to death and he's gone. It's horrible. It's a bloodbath. It's disgusting. I've had to run to one of these cities of refuge. I get there and all I want to do is go home and clean up my baby oxen. But no, if I step outside these gates, the Avenger of Blood's going to be there and I'm going to be judged. I'm safe whilst I'm inside the cities of refuge. As soon as I leave, there's the problem. How you doing?
Would they let actual convicted criminals into the cities of refuge? Or is it just for the people who accidentally killed people?
So, the big difference here is the accidental. So we're looking at manslaughter, not murder. That's the big difference.
Okay.
So if it's someone who's actually just straight up murdered someone, no, it's not an accident. You did it on purpose. Whereas we can read in this chapter, it says, I think verse 5 here, and if the Avenger of Blood pursue after him, and then they shall not deliver the slayer up to his hand, because he smote his neighbour unwittingly, unknowingly, or on accident, and hated him not before time. So there wasn't an anger in his heart towards the person. There wasn't I just want to kill him because I want his land. It was an accident. I didn't know it happened. I'm sorry. I need to get to a city of refuge. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's up?
So if they made like 6 cities for these manslaughter guys, that means that happened a ton, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, why would you need 6 cities? And why would you need this specific law? Well, it's just to keep people safe, right? And that's the thing. Otherwise, you get judged. Everyone gets judged in the same way. And there again, we're going to look through this in a second. We're going to learn about how long they had to stay there, why they had to be in this, what they had to do, you know, and staying put in that same place. That's not your city. It's still a sacrifice, you know? What's up?
So like we said in the witnesses, people can lie.
Yep.
So what if they lied about, like, they said it was manslaughter and it was really murder? Would the elders, like, decide, or what would happen there?
Well, and this is what we're going to do in a second. We're going to look through. Remember what we talked about when we talked about the disciples at Easter time? And how long they kept the truth for? Like, about Jesus. And then some of them went to the cross. Some of them died. Someone was stoned to death. Someone were crucified upside down. All those things that the disciples did. They were willing to wait. And they were willing to live their life because they knew what the truth was. You typically don't have an issue living in the truth. Right? So if you have to be pulled out of your city away from manslaughter, even though everyone else thinks it's murder, but you've been pulled to a refuge city, you can live there knowing that you're not a murderer, that it was an accident. So the elders would believe, would hear the case, and whatever happened here, they will take him into the city and give him a place that he may dwell in. So he would have to tell them. He'd have to declare his case to the elders of that city. That probably means that there was a judging time. It probably means there was a moment of weighing up. What do you think, Wes? I don't think they just went, "No, he's in."
Yeah, I'm
There
sure
would be
they
time.
would have questioned him, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's not going to be like an off-the-cuff decision, because people can lie. And you know what? We have that all the time. It's sad to say at church, people come up on the church doorstep and say, "I'm poor, I've been kicked out of my house, I just need money for this, I just need money." And then they'll take the money and they'll go spend it on drugs or alcohol or anything like that. And we're just trying to be nice. But people take advantage of that. And in this situation, you probably did have people being like, "Yeah, I just killed a dude, I need to get to a city of refuge. I can get in, I can convince them." But notice that he's not even just talking to an elder. It says in verse 4, "And shall declare his cause in the ears of the elders of the city." It's not just one guy. You have to tell everyone. You have to talk to all the people at this gate there. You have to tell them all of your case. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You happy with that? Anyone else? Everyone happy? Cool. So they would have to stay in those cities for that protection, to stay put. It didn't matter then if they left the city and if they left the land of the city, suddenly they're not protected anymore, and the Avenger of Blood could just take them and do whatever they wanted. So there was a sacrifice. They'd have to stay in those cities because the Avenger of Blood would be pursuing them. But in those cities, they knew that there was protection. In those cities, there was a home for them, that they would be kept out of the hands of the Slayer. Out of the hands of the Avenger, because it wasn't murder. So the leaders of the city, these elders of the city, were obliged to protect the one who fled, the one who came. The Avenger of Blood would have no legal standing to deliver the Slayer over to execution. He wasn't allowed in those areas. He could come to the gates and he could try and plead his case, and they're saying, "Hey, we heard him too, and we think he's innocent. We heard him too. And actually what you're saying, or what he says, it's exactly the same thing, but you're saying it was this, and he's saying it's this. We believe him." And sure, there was probably times that they turned people away. But I think this is the amazing part about this. Humans acting like elders and judging and they must be close to God. They must be praying. They must be asking for wisdom. Like, that can't just be a human decision, you know? Elders were people who were anointed and appointed because of their wisdom, their closeness to God, their relationship to God back in those times. That's why they did those things. And that followed through to the New Testament as well. When Paul said you go to a new country and you plant a church, what are you supposed to do? Appoint deacons, appoint elders, appoint leaders. Based on what? The way they live their lives. So you look at these elders and you're thinking they must be doing the same thing as well. Go for it.
Didn't David go to a city of refuge when he was running away from Saul?
Yeah?
So when the elders of the city have turned him in to the king,
Why?
because he's the king.
But why would they have to turn him in? If they're there to keep him safe. Like, they're not judging him on murder. They're trying to. If it's manslaughter, then that's a different story, right?
Right.
And if he's running away from someone trying to kill him, the law of safety is still there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wouldn't the king be able to override that though? Like, not rightfully, but like wrongfully, he could override that.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but this is God's law.
Right.
And you think about what king is in charge back then?
During this time,
David.
Saul,
Okay, who put King Saul in charge?
God.
So it would take Saul turning away from God completely, going completely against his laws, going completely against his rules to do that. So that's a big difference here. We're not talking about just human law. We're not just talking about human laws that can get changed every single day. We're talking about God's law that's put in place and is being honored and being lived through. And that's why there are 6 refuge cities, safety cities, right? Okay, everyone happy? Go for it.
Wait, so people getting chased by like assassins and hitmen, they can stay in these refuge cities?
Yeah, for as long, there's a time limit, but they're for as long as they could, yeah. Okay, verse 5. We can read in verse 5 that they struck his neighbor unintentionally and did not hate him. Okay, that's the deal about intent, about your heart. How weird is it when people say like, oh, there was a bombing, and they go, oh, it was off the cuff, no one knew he was going to do it or anything like that, and then they find the guy's house and he's like got posters of how to build bombs and his search history on his computers. It's premeditation, right? There's intent behind this. It's something that's been planned out over time, and that's what they're saying here. So Israel is saying basically, with their sophisticated legal system, because it was very sophisticated, especially in those times, the laws here are based on intent and premeditation. So basically laws based on people thinking about doing the crime and then going through with it. That's why it says that he didn't have hatred in his heart. That it was unwittingly. He didn't think about it. He didn't do it out of anger. It was out of mistake. So verse 6, and he shall dwell in that city until he stand before the congregation for judgment. So again, he's already had to convince the elders. He's standing at the gates. He's talked them through. This is what happened. My baby oxen, he went crazy. Killed a man. I found him. I had to run. They hired the Avenger of Blood. He's after me. Let me in, please. I didn't mean it to happen. They're convinced. They bring him in. They let him stay in the city. They let him dwell there. And now, verse 6, it says, and he shall dwell in that city until he stand before the congregation for judgment. Go for it.
Wouldn't that Avenger of Blood be trained, right? Probably. So what if he kills you before you get there?
He's not there to kill you.
Oh, right.
He's there to get you to be judged.
Oh, okay.
To pull you before justice. This is the thing. He had rules and laws that they had to stand by as well. Like I said, it wasn't about like a saloon situation where you got a cowboy Lone Ranger coming in to try and find the bad guy and just boo, 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 boo. Well, he must be here somewhere. No, he wasn't allowed to do that. He had to find the guy, find eyewitnesses, and then he was able to bring him to justice. The Avenger of Blood here has a tough task. The guy who is involved in the manslaughter just needs to get to a city of refuge. Then he's okay. But then he gets brought in front of the congregation for judgment. I think that's the crazy part here. He's had to convince the elders. He's lived in a place that's not his home. Now he's being judged by the congregation, all those people around him. And until the death of the high priest that shall be in those days. Why is the high priest a big deal? What do you guys think about that? Any ideas? Until the death of the high priest. Got anything, Wes?
Not sure, no.
No? It's good. Who's our high priest? Me. No. Absolutely not. Who's our high priest? Jesus. Okay? So think about this for us here. We'll dwell in that city of refuge until we stand before the congregation of judgment and until the death of the high priest. So when we get to that death of the high priest, what happens for us? Well, Jesus died for our sins, right? We get cleansed. No more is that manslaughter on our shoulders. No more is that sin on our shoulders, that guilt on our shoulders, because he's taken it. For this guy as well, that high priest would have been the one to okay him coming into the city. He would have been part of the group of elders. He would have been part of that situation, talking to God and bringing him in. Go for him.
So the guy can leave the city if the high priest dies?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's
death
like
of the high
Jesus
priest
kind
that
of
shall
thing.
be in those days, and then the slayer return and come unto his own city, and unto his own house, and to the city from whence he fled.
And then the revenger of blood can't touch him.
Well, this is it. So, to be protected against the avenger of blood, the slayer would have to stay for a very long time. Imagine if that high priest was a young high priest, and you're just a couple of years younger than him. Well, you're going to have to wait till that high priest dies, and then you're set free. So, but he had to stay within the walls of the city of refuge until his case was fully heard by the proper authorities, and until the death of the standing high priest. And after the person is declared innocent of murder by the judge system, by the proper authorities again, and after the death of the standing high priest, the slayer may return home and be protected against the wrath of the avenger of blood. But only after all of those things are done. That's a lot. Think about that. Think about having to work that all out. Well, how long have I been here now? A couple of years. Well, how long do you think we've got left? Well, high priest is only 25 years old. He's got maybe another 20, 30 years left in him before he dies, you know, based on how long people lived back then. It's a big sacrifice. But to be set free, that's what needed to happen. Go for it.
I don't know if this is a dumb question, but could they leave, like, if they wanted to, even if the high priest didn't die?
They could leave, but they would leave all protection.
Yeah.
Think about like sanctuary states, embassies. So the embassies, like in different countries. What happened to the guy who was the big hacker? Snowden? Edward Snowden? And basically he was in Russia having protection from America because he got told that he gave some files over and stuff like that. And he lived in an embassy for so long in Russia so that he wouldn't get arrested. So he wasn't able to get pulled back to England. That's like the city of refuge. Obviously, he did something wrong. This is so that the person can get set free from judgment. But that's the kind of idea that I get from these appointment of 6 cities of refuge. So yeah, you could leave. You could.
Not the best idea, though.
But it wouldn't be the best idea. Especially, because think about that time. The Avenger of Blood's not going to stop working. He'll see you in there and he'll be like, well, I'm going to get my eyewitnesses and then I'll be back. And then it's like, he'll be prepared as much as he can be. So it's one of those things. It's amazing to think that the law was put in place for these type of things. And why? I don't know why. But God felt it necessary for these things to happen. So, yeah, which gets us to section 3. The appointment of 6 cities, verses 7 through 9. So it says this, and they appointed Kadesh in Galilee, in Mount Naphtali, and Shechem in Mount Ephraim, and Kirjathava, look at that, which is in Hebron, in the mountain of Judah. Verse 8, and on the other side, Jordan by Jericho eastward, they assigned Bezer in the wilderness upon the plain out of the tribe of Reuben, and Ramoth of Gilead, out of the tribe of Gad, and Golan and Bashan out of the tribe of Manasseh. Verse 9, these were the cities appointed for all the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourneth among them, that whosoever killeth any person at any unawares might flee thither, and not die by the hand of the avenger of blood, until he stood before the congregation. So this is really important. The 6 cities are appointed for a specific reason, and again, they just repeat kind of what was said back in verses 2 and 3. It's like a repetition thing again. Go for it.
Was anyone allowed to live in the cities?
Yeah.
But they were also protected.
Yeah, they would just have the privilege of living in a city of refuge already. Yeah. It's kind of like they were normal cities, but these specific cities were appointed for a reason, okay? So we're going to have a look at this map. These maps are terrible. They're very blurry. I apologize, as you can see. But you can see here, this one's my favorite, because you can see the overlaps and how far away from each of the cities are, okay? So on a map, we can see that the cities of refuge were spaced throughout the whole country. Remember, this has just been diced up. We can see the blue lines here. These are all dividing, and rivers, all showing different areas and tribes, okay, that have just been divided up and pieced out and given to all the different tribes. They're there. Then you have these 6 cities placed around. And basically it was on purpose that no matter where you were in Israel, no matter where you were, you were not very far away from a city of refuge. Go for it.
Was there any rule about a person going to a city of refuge? Like you can't haul them off to court if they're walking to a city of refuge?
You see the circle around?
Yeah.
That's the land of that area.
Okay.
So notice in verse 7 and 8 there, it says, they appointed Kadesh in Galilee in Mount Naphtali. Basically, as soon as you got into that Mount's land, you're home free. You're in safe zone, right? Shechem in Mount Ephraim and Kirjaratha, which is in Hebron in the mountain of Judah. Again, it's all areas. It's not just one city. It's in that area of that, okay? Other side Jordan by Jericho, eastward they assigned Bezir in the wilderness upon the plain out of the tribe of Reuben. So you've got all these areas. It's not just Bezir, it's the area, the plain of that area as well. Go for it.
So you could just be like born over there, and then you accidentally kill somebody, and you don't need to go anywhere. You can just stay there, right?
Well, you still have to go through the judgment system.
Oh, okay.
You
And
know?
it looks like a pretty big land, so you wouldn't have to move that much, too.
Well, and that's the
Yeah.
point, you know. We can see in Deuteronomy 19, 2 and 3, it says, Thou shalt separate 3 cities for thee in the midst of thy land, which the Lord God giveth thee to possess it. Thou shalt prepare thee a way, and divide the coasts of the land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee to inherit, into 3 parts, that every slayer may flee thither. This tells us that basically these cities were appointed, boom, 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 here, 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 and here. It wasn't just thrown by a dart, it was on specific reasons, right? And they're not even just being told, like, these are the ones and it's done. They have to be taken care of. They have to be maintained. The paths getting to them have to be clear. It has to be good enough that people will know where they're going, okay? It's not just about having the city, it's about maintaining the city. People were told to maintain the cities of refuge, to make sure that roads were accessible. It's not very helpful if the cities were there, but you're not able to get there. Get it? So it's kind of one of those things. Verse 9 tells us again, the whole purpose was for the cities of refuge, that the cities were not just there for the Israelite, but also for the stranger who dwelt among them. And God's justice applied to all without partiality. That's a great thing. It didn't matter whether you were part of God's family or not. If you had done something wrong, it wasn't murder, it was manslaughter, and you managed to get one of these, you were treated the same way. The law is the same for everyone. Sounds kind of similar, right? There's a little crossover here. I love it. The cities of refuge are a picture of Jesus in this as well. They're a direct picture here. The Bible applies this picture of the city of refuge to the believer who finds refuge in God on more than one occasion. A couple of verses for you here. Psalm 46:1 says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Hebrews 6:18, that by 2 immutable things in which it was impossible for God to lie, we might have a strong consolation, who have fled for refuge, to lay hold upon the hope set before us. God is our refuge. God is our safe place to dwell. And these are the points of similarity between the cities of refuge and our refuge in Christ, okay? Both Jesus and the cities of refuge are within easy reach. They're accessible. If the person needs it, they're right there. You can make it. Jesus is right there. You can make it, right? Both Jesus and the cities of refuge are open to all, not just the Israelite, but for the stranger too. What did we find out in Acts? That Paul went to go and preach the gospel to not just the Jew, to the Gentile, to everyone, right? It wasn't just for these specific people, it's for everyone. And that's what we're saying here. The cities are open for all. Everyone who needs safety, you can be there. No one needs to fear that they would be turned away from their place of refuge in their time of need. Jesus doesn't do that. Both Jesus and the cities of refuge become a place where one in need can live. You didn't just come to a city of refuge in time of need just to look around. It's to dwell there. You don't just come and be like, this is a great place, really nice architecture, really nice roads, loved it, this is great, well, 10 out of 10, come back again. No, you go there because you have a need. You go there and you don't leave. You go to Jesus and you don't need to leave. You can stay. And that's a big thing for us. We like to move around. Humans aren't content staying put. Both Jesus and the cities of refuge are the only alternative for the person in need. Without this specific protection, they'll be destroyed. They'll be destroyed. The avenger of blood in those days would take them, stick them in front of a judgment system, get them accused guilty, and what? They would die. And what would happen to their family? Well, they would die. Whether they would die because of involvement or starvation, or maybe his family line would die out because they'd marry a different person and he would take over the family. But they would die. And that's the difference here. Jesus offers a very specific protection against sin, against the devil. How's it going?
Wait, so if you commit murder, your family gets executed too?
Not specifically like the whole family, but it would be like the guy in charge. It would be like your dad didn't teach you well, so he'd have a judgment on him too. And whether that was him being like killed, or whether it was just shame. Shame back in those days was almost just as bad, because it would be like, that family's not good. That family's not a good family. Do not hang around with them. Do not associate with them. Ostracize them. Push them out. Keep them away. So it's almost like, it's still a real tough life, you know? So maybe not death, but like, how do I word it? Like social death? I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Another point here, both Jesus and the cities of refuge provide protection only within their boundaries, right? To go outside means death. To go outside of the cities was death.
Judgment.
Which would lead to death by the avenger of blood. Well, to get outside of Jesus' protection, to leave, to turn our backs, what does that do for us? It leads us to a very tough life. It takes us away from Jesus. With both Jesus and the cities of refuge, but full freedom comes with the death of the high priest. The high priest has to die so that we can have full freedom. Back in those times, it would be the high priest who was serving in the temple. Again, the guy that would have the rope around his waist, and he'd go behind the curtain and he would talk to God. And if he had a little bit of sin on him, he'd be struck down. And then they'd have to pull out the dead body, and then they'd appoint a new high priest. But in our terms, that's Jesus. Our high priest who went to the cross for our sins, who took on all of our shame and guilt and sorrows and went to the cross and died, conquering sin, Satan, and death, resurrecting 3 days later. That's our high priest. That's the big difference. And what does he bring to us? Complete freedom. Freedom from all sin, so that we don't have to worry about it anymore. We didn't have to wait 35, 40 years for a high priest to die. That freedom is available to us now. Just need to take it. Just need to come to Jesus and say, I want to find refuge in you. Let me be here. Let me be in your safety. Let me be in your city. Full freedom through Jesus Christ. The other beautiful thing about this as well is the cities of refuge. This is a big difference. Cities of refuge were there to help the innocent, weren't they? They're not there for the guilty. But the guilty can come to Jesus. The guilty can come to Jesus and be forgiven. The guilty show up at those cities of refuge, they get turned away. Because that was the law. For Jesus, you can find refuge. Okay. 3 final thoughts of Joshua chapter 20. First one, when God puts something in place, we should honor it, respect it, and fulfill it. Moses had this commandment to put these cities into place back in Deuteronomy, and then Joshua had it as well. And it's really important that these things happened, that God's law is honored, that even the avenger of blood, who might just be like, I want to get this guilty guy, he had to abide by God's law. It wasn't about him just going and doing whatever he wanted to do. He had to do what God said. They're rules put in place for a reason, and you have to abide by it, okay? So fast forward to nowadays, are we doing the same thing? God's given us his word, God's given us his law, God's given us the Bible. Are we sticking to what it says? Are we respecting it? Are we honoring it? Are we fulfilling it? Because if not, then we've got some stuff to think about, okay? Second point, God's plans are made, thought through all the way to the very last detail. I love this. Why are 6 cities of refuge being put in place? Well, because of manslaughter. Well, how often does manslaughter happen? I don't know. But just in case it happened, these cities were put in place. God thought about everything to the very last detail, even the worst detail. Even the very worst. But his plans include us. His plans include us to save us, to help us, and to bring us freedom. Not just so that we can be little pawns in his game of chess, but so that we can be part of his family. And that's a big deal for us, okay? And the third and final point here is the most important one. Have you found refuge in Jesus? We're not talking about cities of refuge anymore. We're talking about salvation through Jesus Christ. Refuge in Jesus Christ, okay? Because if you haven't found refuge in him, then I promise you, your life is going to be hard. That doesn't mean the Christian's life is easy, but it's a lot easier knowing you've got Jesus. It's a lot easier knowing that you've got someone who has your back the whole time, who's right here, right there, right behind me all the time, never abandons me, never forsakes me, is with me. Jesus. Have you found refuge in him? Are you 100% sure of that refuge, of that safety that is in Jesus' hands? Because that's the most important thing in our lives, your relationship with Jesus Christ. Guys, that is Joshua chapter 20.